includes the lungs.
It includes the lungs, good, yeah.
Gas exchange.
Gas exchange,
CO2 and oxygen.
CO2 and oxygen, as well as the other stuff.
Yeah.
But those are the two primaries. Oxygen in, CO2 out.
Alveoli?
We have alveoli.
Yes,
That's the functional unit. Yeah. What else?
Muscles. Muscles.
There are muscles involved, skeletal muscles,
Mm-hmm.
because every inspiration requires skeletal muscle contraction. Your diaphragm goes from a dome to flat, back to a dome to flat. Do you know how many times we respirate in a minute?
A lot.
Depends on activity level.
It does, it depends on activity level, but it's generally pretty low. It's about 12 to 15, yeah, in that range, 15, so it depends on the individual. And like you said, it depends on the activity level. You're gonna respirate more, the more you exercise. Do you know why?
We study this because of the rapid glucose uptake. So you need it.
That's
to
really not the
produce
driver.
ATP really quick.
That's not the driver.
What?
Yes, who said
Get
that?
rid of carbon dioxide.
That's right, it's the CO2 levels. Because CO2 plus H2O yields carbonic acid. Carbonic acid dissociates into bicarbonate ions and hydrogen ions.
And then you get pH.
And then when you have too much hydrogen ions, and your red blood cells don't have enough room for those hydrogen ions get pushed to the plasma and then to the cerebrospinal fluid and then to your medulla oblongata. What's your medulla oblongata all about?
Control center.
Control center for respiration and
Heartbeat.
right. So the two primary functions that keep us going. So when we have too much CO2 production, and why do we produce CO2? Making glucose, burning glucose to make ATP. So CO2 is the driver, the primary driver for respiratory rate. The higher your hydrogen ion concentration, the lower your pH, the more your brain says, oh my God, you're so acidic. You gotta get rid of that extra acid. Breathe. That's what that's all about. Yeah, so your respiratory system is about gas exchange. It involves skeletal muscles. It involves a very important structure. We saw that Beth's laryngoscopy, looking through that little slit. Every inhalation, that slit is open. Exhalation, that slit is open. And as I'm speaking, I'm not breathing. I have to stop speaking so that I can breathe. Same thing when you eat. You know you're not breathing when you swallow, right? You swallow, then you breathe.
And then you choke.
Unless it gets in the wrong tube, or it goes down the wrong tube. That means that you've got something that passed the epiglottis and got into your larynx, and then your larynx goes, ah, panics. All right, so what else about the respiratory system?
It's, what's the word for it? It's unconscious.
Yes, unless we want to control it. So it's one of the systems that we actually can override the unconscious control, and we have conscious control. I can hold my breath. How long can I hold my breath? Well, it kind of depends. But what's happening when I'm holding my breath?
CO2 buildup.
That's right. Hydrogen ion concentration builds up. Medulla says, you're going to breathe. This is why you cannot kill yourself by holding your breath.
But babies can
Because
pass
you're going
out.
to pass out.
Babies can pass out. They don't have the as much brain.
They might not have their
warning system
hypothalamus.
fully
Yeah,
online, so they can make themselves pass out
yeah,
if they hold their breath.
yeah. And then they're going to breathe.
Yeah. And then they'll start breathing.
Yeah. All right, good. So, the respiratory system, as we've already identified, is responsible for gas exchange. That's a biggie. The gas that we take in, the oxygen that we take in, of course, is essential for making ATP. It is. Why? How does it work?
So your cells can work.
So let's talk about the cycle, right? To make ATP, we use a glucose. We take that simple monomer, glucose. It's a 6-carbon sugar, and that 6-carbon sugar is broken into 2 3-carbon sugars, which are then burned to 2 carbon sugars, and then turned into 4 carbon sugars. They go through the citric acid cycle, and as that 4-carbon molecule goes through the citric acid cycle, carbon's peeled off. We need oxygen to pick up the carbon. That's where we produce CO2. We also produce water because we have hydrogen ions then. So we take carbon, then we have hydrogen ions that haven't got anything to attach to, and then oxygen picks up those hydrogen ions. So we produce CO2 and water And what else do we produce during the citric acid cycle? What's a byproduct of it? Not ATP, because that's the purpose.
NADH and FADH too.
Yep, we got the coenzymes. Heat. Make heat. You start out on a winter morning in your exercise routine, you're all bundled up. 15 minutes in, you're shedding the outer layer. Why? Because you're burning glucose, making ATP, and producing heat, as well as CO2. So you take in oxygen, glucose plus oxygen, produces CO2 plus water and ATP and heat. Yeah, failure of the respiratory and circulatory system causes pretty close eats to death. Do you know how long you have without breathing before your brain dies?
Isn't it?
4 to 5 minutes.
Oh,
You have an excess of oxygen being carried around in your red cells. Not every red cell gives up every oxygen molecule every time through the lungs. So you have a reserve. And so you have about 5 minutes before you die of oxygen starvation.
Is that just for adults? Or like older people? Because younger and older people.
Yeah, difference in respiratory rates.
Yeah.
I think it's about the same.
Oh, okay.
And what happens when a neuron dies?
It kills other
It's
neurons.
dead.
It kills other neurons, right? You know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, neurons don't like to have dead neurons around them. It's toxic. So one neuron dies, it becomes toxic to all the other neurons. So I want you to remember this formula right here. Carbon dioxide plus water, both byproducts of respiration, produce carbonic acid. That carbonic acid dissociates into bicarbonate ions and hydrogen ions. The bicarbonate is shipped out into the plasma. The hydrogen ions are picked up by the red blood cells that are depleted of oxygen. We go the other way. Hydrogen ions are pulled from the red blood cells, combined with bicarbonate pulled from the plasma, forms carbonic acid, and that carbonic acid dissociates into CO2 and water. So this is expiration. And the other way is inspiration. Yeah. So our respiratory system works very closely with our circulatory system because we depend on blood to bring the oxygen to the tissues. We depend on blood to carry the CO2 away from the tissues. We also depend on blood to carry lots of other things that you already know from 232. You'll see sometimes that the circulatory system is combined with the respiratory system and called the cardiopulmonary system because, yeah, without the circulatory system, we'd have no blood flowing through the lungs. And without blood flowing through the lungs, we wouldn't pick up oxygen and take it to the tissues. We wouldn't pick up CO2 from the tissues and deliver it to the lungs so we can get rid of it. And so we have very, very important functional relationship with the two, and spatially, they're closely related. What things occupy our thorax? 2 lungs and a heart. We got a thymus in there. We have this space called the mediastinum, and everything but the lungs are contained within the mediastinum. The heart has its own little serous membrane. Does anybody remember what the serous membranes are called for the heart? Pericardial and parietal and visceral pericardium. Yep. The lungs have their own serous membranes.
It's parietal and visceral.
Pleura.
Yes.
The parietal and visceral pleura.
Right, the other one.
All contained within the thorax, nicely protected. Not a solid cage like our brain has a solid cranium, but pretty close to, well protected because of the degree to which we depend on these 2 different systems and the structures within. We are terrestrial animals, as this slide says. Yes, we are terrestrial animals. And because we're terrestrial animals, we contain our lungs within the body. Some animals do not need that, like fish don't have lungs because they are already in a moist environment. Our lungs are contained within our thorax. They are kept moist because we can transmit gases back and forth much more easily in a moist environment than we do a dry environment. So that's why our lungs are contained within the thorax, within our body. And this, of course, as it says, is an adaptation for living on land. There are some creatures that don't, like fish, and certain reptiles that can spend time in water and have different respiratory systems because of their environment. Lungs require moisture because gases are transmitted, are moved from one space to another much more easily through a moist environment. So our respiratory system, as we've already identified, is important for gas exchange. And the gas exchange is accomplished very effectively over many, many, many surfaces. So when we look at the lungs in lab on Wednesday, we're going to look at the dehydrated lungs of a sheep, and we'll get to appreciate how light the tissue is, minus all the fluids. And then I want you to look at your cellulose sponge. Everybody have a cellulose sponge in your kitchen? No? No cellulose sponge? I'll bring some sponges in for you.
And then just like a dish sponge?
Yeah, just, yeah.
Oh,
With
okay.
the little pockets, the little holes, right? That's a cellulose sponge. Maybe it's not a cellulose anymore. It's a sponge. Our lungs look like sponges. They are air-filled pockets with capillary beds on the surface of all those air-filled pockets. So we're going to appreciate that we have many, many surfaces where we can have the diffusion of gases back and forth between the blood and the alveoli, and the alveoli and the blood. And we are going to see, as we continue our discussion, that we have these tissues, the pleura, very important for the lungs, to keep them nice and moist, and to allow them for our lungs to expand, filled with air, and then decrease in size as we move air out. Our lungs are actually kind of adhering to the walls of our thorax because of the qualities, the properties of water molecules. You know, water molecules adhere to each other through hydrogen bonds, and they form an adhesive connection to other surfaces, those water molecules. So cohesion, connecting to each other, adhesion, connecting to the walls of the thorax. So our lungs are always constantly slightly inflated. When we contract our skeletal muscles, the external intercostals, we shorten the distance between the ribs. Those ribs get pulled up and out. And when our diaphragm goes from a dome shape to a flat, it contracts. It increases the size of the thorax this way. When our ribs come up and out, it increases the size of the thorax this way. Well, our lungs are kind of glued to the walls. They actually get pulled open. Yeah. So inspiration is an active process. Skeletal contraction. Air is pulled in, and the air is pulled in because of differences in pressure between the outside atmosphere and the inside atmosphere. All of this we're going to be talking about more in depth. And it's these tissues that allow us to do all that. So the serous membranes, the parietal pleura and the visceral pleura, produce serous fluid. That is that watery substance that glues the lungs to the walls. Respiration. Our respiratory system is not strictly involving the lungs. Nose, very important part of the respiratory system. You don't want to be a mouth breather for one very simple reason. When you breathe through your mouth, you are not taking advantage of all of the filtering, warming, and moistening that happens through the nasal cavities. The filtering process is really important because the air that we're breathing is by no means clean, loaded with stuff. We want to filter as much of that out as possible through the nasal cavities. The nasal cavities send that air to the nasopharynx, nasopharynx, oropharynx, oropharynx to the larynx. And all that passage of air through those spaces involves filtering, moistening, and warming. So take the cool air and warm it up, send it to our lungs. As we've already noticed, that we are dependent on our respiratory system for sound. And, you know, our respiratory system, the smelling is important for taste. You want to be able to smell things so you can taste them. So olfaction is a part of our respiratory system as well. Just one last thing here, this last slide we'll finish up. for today. Regulation of blood pressure through the conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Do you remember the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system? Kind of, sort of. Renin, I should say renin, not renin. Renin is produced in the kidneys. And it is produced in the kidneys based on your blood pressure. Believe it or not, your kidneys have a big role in maintaining correct blood pressure. So renin is produced in the kidneys when you have low blood pressure. That renin is delivered to the liver, and renin induces the liver to convert angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 travels through the blood, hits the lungs where there's a angiotensin converting enzyme in the capillaries of the lungs. Angiotensin 1 gets converted to angiotensin 2, and then angiotensin 2 has widespread effect, causes vasoconstriction overall, causes your adrenals to release aldosterone, which then tells your kidneys to recoup more sodium. Chloride is recoup more chloride, sorry, to recoup more water, you increase your blood pressure, right? It's all tied in together. So that's that part. We've talked about the pH, the regulation of pH by getting rid of CO2. We've talked not at all about the respiratory pump, but the respiratory system is important for moving blood and lymph from your lower limbs up into your thorax to get to the heart. We'll talk more about that when we get closer to it. You depend on your respiratory system. I don't know if you know this or not, but think about it. Next time you're sitting on the toilet, and you're urinating or you're defecating, how much are you holding your breath and pushing to push urine out of your bladder or to push feces out of your rectum? You depend on holding your breath, compression of your abdominal viscera. Anybody that's had a baby knows that you're using those muscles to push that baby out through the birth canal, the Valsalva maneuver. We depend on our respiratory system to take care of these ever so small little blood clots. We have these cells, they're called alveolar dust cells or alveolar macrophages, and they can break up these little minor blood clots so that they don't get carried to larger spaces. And that's where we're going to stop. So when we pick up this lecture on Wednesday, we'll start talking about the different functional and anatomical components. And I'm so happy to see you all.